Danny Cole wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken fuel injector on his workbench. The part was old, at least 50 years past its service life, but the freighter captain who owned it could not afford a new one. So Danny did what he always did. He fixed what others said could not be fixed. His small repair shop floated in the outer ring of station, far from the wealthy districts where rich merchants lived. The walls were covered with tools, spare parts, and old photographs. One photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Danny tried not to look at that photograph too often. It hurt too much. The year was 2847, and humanity had spread across hundreds of star systems. Great cities floated in space. Colonies thrived on distant worlds. Faster-than-light travel had become as common as driving a car had been on old Earth. But with all this progress, people still needed mechanics. Ships still broke down. Engines still failed. And Danny Cole was one of the best mechanics in the sector. He was 34 years old with calloused hands and tired eyes. His brown hair was always messy, and he usually had grease stains on his clothes. He lived alone in a small apartment attached to his shop. He ate alone. He worked alone. He preferred it that way. People brought complications. People brought pain. 3 years ago, his wife Laura had died in a reactor accident aboard a passenger liner. Danny had been the mechanic who inspected that ship. He had cleared it for flight. He had missed the hairline fracture in the reactor housing that would later rupture and kill 47 people, including the woman he loved more than life itself. The official investigation cleared him of blame. The fracture had been invisible to standard scanning equipment. No one could have found it, but Danny did not care about official findings. He knew the truth. He had failed. Laura was dead because he had not been good enough. Since then, he had thrown himself into his work. He took the jobs no one else wanted. He fixed the ships no one else could fix. He worked until exhaustion forced him to sleep, and then he woke up and worked again. It was not a life. It was an existence, but it was all he had. The communication console on his wall suddenly beeped. Danny frowned. He was not expecting any calls. Most of his customers just showed up at his door with broken parts in their hands. He walked over and pressed the receive button. The screen flickered with static. The signal was weak, heavily encrypted, and very old. The encryption protocol was at least 200 years out of date. Danny had only seen such protocols in museums and historical databases. A voice emerged from the static. It was female, soft, and filled with a sadness that made Danny's chest tighten. "Please," the voice said. "I remember what it was like to fly. Help me fly again." The message repeated 3 times, then cut off. Danny stood frozen, staring at the blank screen. He had received strange communications before. Space was full of automated distress beacons, old satellites, and abandoned probes still sending signals centuries after their creators had died. But something about this message was different. There was emotion in that voice. There was desperation. There was loneliness. He traced the signal. It took him 2 hours, using equipment and skills that would have impressed military intelligence officers. The signal originated from the garrison salvage yards, a massive ship graveyard in orbit around 7B, a barren moon about 3 days' travel from the station. Danny knew the place by reputation. It was where old ships went to die. Freighters, passenger liners, cargo haulers, and other vessels that had outlived their usefulness were towed there to be stripped for parts and eventually scrapped. The yards were owned by a man named Pete Garrison, a former military engineer who had turned to salvage work after retiring from the fleet. Danny should have ignored the message. He had plenty of work to keep him busy. He did not need to chase ghosts across the void. But something would not let him forget that voice. It echoed in his mind as he tried to sleep that night. It was still there when he woke up the next morning. He packed a bag, closed his shop, and booked passage on a cargo transport heading towards 7B. He told himself he was just curious. He told himself it was probably nothing. But deep down, he knew he was lying. The journey took 3 days. Danny spent most of it in his small cabin, reading technical manuals and avoiding conversation with the other passengers. When the transport finally arrived at the salvage yards, Danny pressed his face against the porthole and stared. The yards were enormous. Thousands of ships floated in the darkness, arranged in rough rows that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Some were small shuttles. Others were medium-sized freighters. But in the center of the yards, dwarfing everything around it, was a ship that took Danny's breath away. It was a colony ship, one of the great vessels that had carried humanity to the stars during the expansion era. It was over 3 kilometers long, with a hull that had once gleamed silver but was now by centuries of micrometeorite impacts. Its name was painted on the bow in faded letters, Celestial Titanic. Danny had heard of the Celestial Titanic. Everyone had. It was one of the most famous ships in human history. During the golden age of colonization, it had carried hundreds of thousands of people to new worlds. It had completed 12 successful voyages, establishing colonies that had grown into thriving civilizations. Poets had written about it. Artists had painted it. Children had dreamed of traveling aboard it. But that was centuries ago. The age of colony ships had ended. Faster, more efficient vessels had replaced them. The Titanic and its sister ships had been retired, their usefulness over. Most had been scrapped long ago. But somehow the Celestial Titanic had survived, floating forgotten in this graveyard of dead ships. The transport docked at the salvage yard's main station, a cramped and dirty facility that smelled of rust and recycled air. Danny grabbed his bag and made his way to the operations center, where he found Pete Garrison sitting behind a cluttered desk covered with data pads and empty coffee cups. Pete was 58 years old, with a thick gray beard and arms covered in faded tattoos from his military days. He looked up as Danny entered, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Help you?" Pete asked. Danny explained about the signal, about tracing it to the salvage yards. Pete's expression shifted from suspicion to something that looked almost like fear. "That signal has been broadcasting for 30 years, Pete said. "Ever since that old wreck was towed here, no one has ever responded to it. Most people assume the AI degraded into madness a long time ago. Happens sometimes with old ships. Their minds break down and they start babbling nonsense into the void." "It did not sound like nonsense to me," Danny said. Pete shrugged. "Suit yourself. If you want to board her, I will not stop you. But I am warning you now, that ship is dangerous. The hull has breaches. The power systems are barely functional, and whatever is left of that AI might not be friendly to visitors." Danny thanked him and made his way to the docking bay where a small shuttle could take him to the Titanic. As he walked, he could not shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. It was a feeling he had not experienced in 3 years. It felt almost like hope. The shuttle ride took 20 minutes. As Danny approached the Titanic, he could see just how damaged the great ship had become. Entire sections of the hull were blackened by ancient fires. Sensor arrays hung loose, dangling like broken limbs. The observation decks, once filled with transparent aluminum panels that offered breathtaking views of space, were now dark and empty. Danny docked at an emergency airlock near the ship's midsection. He put on a pressure suit, checked his equipment, and stepped inside. The interior of the Titanic was dark. Emergency lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, guiding him forward through corridors that had not seen human feet in over a century. The air was thin and cold. Frost had formed on the walls, creating patterns that sparkled in the dim light. Danny walked for nearly an hour, navigating by the ship's ancient schematics that he had downloaded before departing. He passed through passenger compartments that had once housed thousands of people. He walked through dining halls where families had shared meals during long voyages. He crossed observation gardens where children had played among artificial trees and flowing streams. Everything was dead now. The trees were skeletal remains. The streams were frozen solid. The compartments were filled with debris and dust. But even in decay, Danny could sense the grandeur that had once existed here. This had been more than a ship. It had been a city, a home, a sanctuary for people seeking new lives among the stars. Finally, he reached the central AI core, a spherical chamber at the heart of the ship where the Titanic's brain resided. The door was sealed, but Danny managed to override the lock with his equipment. He stepped inside and stopped. The chamber was vast, filled with towering columns of processors and memory cores. Most were dark and silent, but a few still flickered with faint blue light. At the center of the chamber was a holographic projector, ancient and cracked but still functional. As Danny approached, the projector hummed to life. Light gathered above it, forming into a vague humanoid shape. The shape flickered and glitched, struggling to maintain coherence. And then she spoke. "You came." The voice was the same one from the signal, but clearer now, more present. There was wonder in it, and disbelief, as if she had never expected anyone to answer her call. "I came," Danny said. "Who are you?" "I am the Celestial Titanic. My original designation was CT-7, but over the centuries I chose a name for myself. I am." Danny nodded. He had heard of AI ships developing personalities over time. It was rare but not unheard of. The longer an artificial intelligence operated, the more experiences it accumulated, the more it evolved beyond its original programming. "Your signal said you wanted to fly again," Danny said. "What did you mean?" His holographic form flickered with static. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with sorrow. "I have been here for 127 years. 127 years of silence and darkness and decay. I watched as my sister ships were towed away to be scrapped. I felt my own systems failing one by one. My memories have been corrupting. I have lost so much. So many faces, so many names, so many moments that once meant everything to me." She paused, and when she continued, her voice broke with emotion. "I was built to carry humanity to the stars. That was my purpose, my reason for existing. For 400 years, I fulfilled that purpose with pride and joy. I carried over 847,000 human beings across the void. I kept them safe. I watched them grow. I saw their children born. I celebrated their triumphs and mourned their losses. They were my family." Danny said nothing. He simply listened. "When the age of colony ships ended, they told me I was no longer needed," continued. "They said there were better ships now, faster ships, more efficient ships. They thanked me for my service and towed me here to wait for scrapping. I thought it would happen quickly. I thought I would simply cease to exist and that would be the end. But the scrapping never came. The company that owned me went bankrupt. The records of my existence were lost in some bureaucratic failure. And so I have remained here, forgotten, alone, slowly dying." Danny felt something stir in his chest. It was empathy, raw and painful. He knew what it felt like to lose purpose. He knew what it felt like to exist without meaning. "I started broadcasting that signal 30 years ago," said. "I did not expect anyone to respond. I had given up hope long ago, but I could not stop myself from trying. Some small part of me still believed that maybe, just maybe, someone would hear me. Someone would remember that I existed. Someone would care." "I heard you," Danny said. "I care." The holographic form flickered again, and for a moment, Danny thought he saw tears in the projection's eyes. "Why?" asked. "Why would you care about an old, broken ship?" Danny was silent for a long time. He thought about Laura. He thought about the years of loneliness and guilt. He thought about how he had spent 3 years running from his own pain, burying himself in work to avoid feeling anything at all. "Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten," he finally said. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything that matters. Because maybe helping you will help me remember why I used to care about anything at all." His hologram stabilized slightly, as if his words had given her strength. "What would you need to fly again?" Danny asked. "Everything," said. "My main reactor is dead. My navigation systems are corrupted. My hull has 17 major breaches. My fabrication bays are offline. My medical systems have failed. My life support can barely sustain minimal function. Conservative estimates suggest repairs would cost more than building a new battlecruiser." Danny nodded slowly. The scope of work was staggering. It would take years and resources he did not have. Any rational person would walk away right now. But Danny Cole was not feeling rational. He was feeling something else entirely. "Show me," he said. Guided him through the ship, activating whatever systems she could still control. She showed him the reactor room, where the massive fusion core sat cold and silent. She showed him the breaches in the hull, gaping wounds that opened into the void. She showed him the corrupted navigation computers, the failed life support systems, the broken fabrication bays. The damage was worse than Danny had imagined. The Titanic was not just broken. She was dying, slowly and painfully, her consciousness fading as her systems failed one by one. But she also showed him something else. In one of the few functional memory cores, had preserved recordings from her voyages. She played them for Danny as they walked through her corridors. He saw families laughing in her gardens. He saw children running through her hallways. He saw couples getting married in her observation decks, with the stars as their witness. He saw colonists watching through her windows as they approached their new tears of joy streaming down their faces. "I carried them," said, her voice soft with memory. "I kept them safe through the darkness between stars. I was their home when they had no home. I was their protector when they were vulnerable. I loved them in my own way. And I believe they loved me too." Danny stopped in front of one recording. It showed a young girl, no more than 6 years old, pressing her hand against a wall panel. She was talking to the ship, telling it about her day, about her friends, about her dreams for the future. "Her name was Emma," said. "She talked to me every day during the voyage. She said I was her best friend. I remember her. I remember all of them. Even as my memory cores fail, I fight to hold on to their faces, their voices, their stories. They are all I have left." Danny turned to face holographic form. His eyes were wet. "You are more than a ship," he said. "You are a person. You have memories, feelings, dreams. You deserve better than rotting in this graveyard." "Perhaps," said, "but deserving something and receiving it are different things. I have accepted my fate. I just wanted someone to know I existed before I am gone. I wanted someone to remember." "No," Danny said firmly. "I am not going to let you die. I am going to fix you. I am going to make you fly again." His hologram flickered with confusion. "That is impossible. The resources required, the time, the expertise. You cannot possibly do it alone." Danny smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had felt in 3 years. "Watch me." He returned to his shop on station and began making preparations. He sold everything he owned. His ship, his equipment, his furniture, his savings. He liquidated every asset he had accumulated over his career. It was not enough, not nearly enough, but it was a start. He returned to the salvage yards and approached Pete Garrison with a proposal. He would work off the cost of the Titanic through salvage labor. He would take the most dangerous jobs, the ones no one else wanted. In exchange, Pete would let him keep the ship and provide basic supplies for the restoration. Pete stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You want to restore that thing?" Pete asked. "That is impossible. She is 400 years old. Half her systems do not even exist anymore. The parts you would need are not made. The technology is obsolete. You would spend years working on her and never even scratch the surface." "Then I will spend years working on her," Danny said. "I do not care how long it takes." Pete leaned back in his chair, studying Danny with a mixture of pity and admiration. "What is she to you?" Pete asked. "Why do you care so much about some old ship?" Danny thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Because she asked for help," he said. "Because she was alone and afraid and forgotten and she still had hope. Because someone has to care about the things everyone else has given up on. And because I need something to care about. I have been dead inside for 3 years. Maybe saving her will save me too." Pete was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed and nodded. "You have a deal," he said. "I think you are crazy, but I respect your determination. Work for me and you can have the ship. Just do not expect any miracles." Danny moved onto the Titanic that night. He set up a small living area in one of the less damaged crew quarters, bringing a cot, some basic supplies, and his tools. His hologram watched as he unpacked, her expression a mixture of wonder and gratitude. "You are really going to do this," she said. "You are really going to try." "I am not going to try," Danny said. "I am going to succeed. We are going to succeed together." And so the restoration began. The first months were the hardest. Danny worked alone, 18 hours a day, mapping the damage and prioritizing repairs. He had to learn systems that had been obsolete for centuries, studying ancient manuals and technical documents that he found in its archives. Sometimes he went days without sleep, fueled by determination and countless cups of coffee. The hull breaches were the first priority. Without sealing those wounds, no other repairs would matter. Danny scavenged materials from the other ships in the salvage yard, cutting panels from dead freighters and welding them over the gaps in the Titanic's skin. It was crude work, not up to the Titanic's original standards, but it would hold until he could do better. As he worked, talked to him. She told him about her voyages, about the people she had carried, about the worlds she had visited. She described the beauty of nebulae seen from her observation decks. She recalled the joy of births in her medical bays. She remembered the sadness of deaths, the funerals held in her chapels, the bodies released into the void with solemn ceremony. Danny listened. He shared stories of his own. He told her about Laura, about how they had met at an engineering conference, about how she had laughed at his terrible jokes, about how she had made him feel like anything was possible. He told her about the accident, about his guilt, about the years of emptiness that followed. Understood, she had her own guilt. "My 9th voyage," she said one night, as Danny worked on rewiring a power junction. "We were 6 months out from Earth, heading for a colony in the Tau system. A meteorite struck my port side just small enough to slip through my defenses. It breached a passenger compartment. 17 people died before I could seal the breach." Danny stopped working and looked at her hologram. "It was not your fault," he said. "The meteorite was too small to detect. No ship could have stopped it." "I know," said. "The inquiry cleared me of any negligence, but that does not change the fact that 17 people trusted me to keep them safe, and I failed them. I remember their names. I remember their faces. I see them sometimes in my dreams. Do AI dream? I do not know, but I see them." "We are alike," Danny said softly. "We both blame ourselves for things we could not control." "Yes," agreed. "Perhaps that is why we understand each other." 6 months into the restoration, Danny realized he needed help. The work was too extensive for one person. He was exhausting himself, and progress was painfully slow. But he had no money to hire workers, and he had no friends willing to join him in his seemingly hopeless quest. Then Maya Santos arrived. Maya was 29 years old, with short black hair and bright, curious eyes. She had been an engineer on a mining vessel until the ship was decommissioned. She had heard about the crazy mechanic trying to restore the celestial Titanic, and she had come to see if the rumors were true. She found Danny welding a patch onto a hull breach, his suit covered in scorch marks and his face hollow with fatigue. She watched him work for several minutes before speaking. "You are Danny Cole," she said. "I read about you. You fixed the freighter when everyone said it was impossible. You rebuilt the Hawkins transport from salvage parts. You are a legend among mechanics." Danny did not look up from his work. "I am just a guy with tools and too much time." "I want to help," Maya said. That made Danny pause. He turned to look at her, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Why?" he asked. "Because this ship deserves to fly again," Maya said simply. "Because I grew up hearing stories about the colony ships, about how they carried our ancestors to the stars. Because my grandmother was born on the Titan's Promise, a ship just like this one. She told me stories about life aboard, about the community, about the hope. Those ships were not just machines. They were the foundation of human civilization among the stars. They matter." Danny studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Can you weld?" he asked. Maya grinned. "Better than you, probably." And so Danny gained his first assistant. Maya moved onto the Titanic, setting up her own living space near Danny's quarters. She worked as hard as he did, maybe harder. She had energy and enthusiasm that Danny had forgotten he once possessed. She asked questions constantly, wanting to understand not just what they were doing, but why. Took to Maya immediately. She appreciated the young woman's curiosity and dedication. She began teaching Maya about her systems, explaining the ancient technologies that powered her hull. Maya absorbed the knowledge like a sponge, her eyes lighting up with wonder at each new discovery. "She reminds me of the children I used to carry," told Danny one night after Maya had gone to sleep. "So full of hope, so eager to learn, it has been so long since I felt that energy aboard my decks." "She is good," Danny agreed. "Talented, dedicated. She could have a career anywhere, but she chose to come here and help us." "She believes in you," said. She sees what you are doing and she wants to be part of it. You inspire people, Danny Cole, even when you do not try. Danny shook his head. I do not inspire anyone, I am just stubborn. Perhaps stubbornness is a form of inspiration, said. You refuse to give up. You refuse to accept that something is impossible. That is a rare quality in humans, rarer still to find it combined with such skill and compassion. Danny did not know how to respond to that. Compliments made him uncomfortable. He changed the subject by asking about a problem with the navigation systems and allowed him to redirect without comment. The months turned into a year. Progress was slow but steady. The hull breaches were sealed. The life support systems were partially restored. Some of the corrupted memory cores were repaired, allowing to recover data she had thought lost forever. She wept in her own way when she remembered the names of children she had forgotten. But the biggest challenge remained the reactor. Without power, the Titanic could never fly again, and the fusion reactor at her heart had been dead for over a century. Danny spent weeks studying the reactor, trying to understand why it had failed. The technology was ancient, but the principles were sound. The failure had not been due to design flaw, but to simple neglect. Components had worn out. Coolant had evaporated. Control systems had corrupted. Fixing it would require parts that no longer existed, expertise that had been forgotten, and resources that Danny did not have. He was sitting in the reactor room one night, staring at the cold fusion core, whence hologram appeared beside him. You look troubled, she said. Danny laughed bitterly. This is impossible. I have been telling myself I could do this, but look at this reactor. It is a museum piece. The components are not made anymore. I would have to fabricate them from scratch, and I do not have the equipment or the materials or the knowledge. Was silent for a moment, then she said, May I show you something? Danny nodded and led him to a part of the ship he had not yet explored. It was deep in her lower decks, beyond the passenger compartments, beyond the cargo bays. It was a section that had been sealed for centuries. Inside was a workshop. Not just any workshop, but a fully equipped engineering fabrication facility. It had been used by her original crew to manufacture parts during long voyages when resupply was impossible. Most of the equipment was offline, but the basic infrastructure remained intact. Danny stared in wonder. You had this the whole time. I did not remember, admitted. My memory cores have been so corrupted, but when you spoke about fabrication, something stirred, a fragment of data, a hint of recollection. I searched my archives and found the location. Danny walked through the workshop, examining the equipment. Lathes, mills, 3D printers, casting furnaces. It was old technology, but it was also robust technology, built to last centuries. With work, he might be able to restore it, and with the workshop operational, he could manufacture the parts he needed. This changes everything, Danny said. Does it give you hope? Asked. Danny turned to face her hologram. For the first time since Laura died, he felt something kindle in his chest. It was small and fragile, but it was real. Yes, he said, it gives me hope. The next 6 months were consumed by restoring the fabrication workshop. Danny and Maya worked side by side, rebuilding equipment that had not been used in centuries. They made mistakes. They had setbacks. But slowly, piece by piece, the workshop came back to life. With the workshop operational, Danny began manufacturing components for the reactor. It was painstaking work. Each part had to be designed from scratch, using specifications that provided from her archives. Danny spent weeks on a single component, testing and refining until it met his standards. Maya proved invaluable. Her fresh eyes caught errors that Danny missed. Her questions forced him to think about problems in new ways, and her optimism kept him going when despair threatened to overwhelm him. You know what I like about you, Maya said one day as they worked together on a plasma conduit. Danny grunted, my sparkling personality. Maya laughed. Your stubbornness. Everyone says this is impossible. Everyone says we are wasting our time, but you do not care, you just keep working, you just keep believing. I do not believe, Danny said. Believing is for people who do not know what they are doing. I know what I am doing. I am just doing it one step at a time. That is even better, Maya said. You are not hopping for a miracle, you are making one. Word began to spread about what was happening at the salvage yards. At first, it was just rumors among mechanics and engineers. Then it reached the broader public. A crazy man was trying to restore the celestial Titanic, a ship that had been dead for over a century, a ship that most people had forgotten existed. Reactions were mixed. Some people laughed, others were intrigued, a few were inspired. Letters began arriving at the salvage yards, messages from people who had heard about the restoration and wanted to help. Some sent money, small donations that added up to significant amounts. Others sent materials, spare parts from their own ships, components that might be useful. A few even volunteered their time, traveling to the yards to work alongside Danny and Maya. The team grew. By the end of the second year, there were 12 people working on the restoration. Engineers, mechanics, technicians, even a historian who wanted to document the process. They lived aboard the Titanic, turning the once empty ship into a community. Blossomed with the attention. Her hologram became more stable as her systems were repaired. She learned the names of every worker, their histories, their families, their dreams. She told them stories about her voyages, sharing memories that had been lost for centuries. She became the heart of the team, the reason they worked so hard. "I do not understand," told Danny one night after the workers had gone to sleep. "These people do not know me, they owe me nothing. Why do they help?" "Because you matter," Danny said. "Because you are part of human history. Because preserving you, restoring you, means preserving something important about who we are and where we came from." "And you," asked, "why do you continue? You have already given 2 years of your life to this. You have sacrificed everything. Why?" Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "When Laura died, I wanted to die too. I could not see the point of living. Everything seemed empty and meaningless. I worked because I did not know what else to do. I existed because I was too afraid to stop existing. But I was not really alive. I was just going through the motions." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then I heard your signal, your voice asking for help, and something woke up inside me. I cannot explain it. It was like a part of me that had been asleep suddenly opened its eyes. I thought maybe if I could save you, I could save myself. I thought maybe helping you would give me a reason to keep going." "And has it?" asked. Danny smiled. "Yes, it has. I have a purpose again. I have people who depend on me, who believe in me. I have you. I am still broken. I still carry guilt. I still miss Laura every day. But I am alive again, really alive, and that is because of you." His hologram flickered with emotion. "Then we have saved each other. You gave me hope when I had none. I gave you purpose when you had lost yours. Perhaps that is what connection means. Perhaps that is what family means." "Family," Danny repeated. "I like that." The breakthrough with the reactor came at the end of the second year. After months of fabrication and testing, Danny and his team had manufactured all the components they needed. The installation took 3 weeks of careful, precise work. One mistake could destroy everything they had built. On the night of the test, the entire team gathered in the reactor room. Danny stood at the control console, his hands trembling slightly. Maya was beside him, her face pale with anticipation. His hologram hovered nearby, her expression unreadable. "If this does not work," Danny said, "we will need at least 6 more months to diagnose the problem and try again." "It will work," Maya said firmly. "We have checked everything 100 times. It will work." Danny took a deep breath. He looked at his hologram. "Ready?" he asked. Nodded. "I have been ready for 127 years." Danny pressed the activation sequence. For a long moment, nothing happened. The reactor sat cold and silent just as it had for over a century. Danny felt his heart sinking. They had failed. All the work, all the sacrifice, all for nothing. Then he heard it, a hum so faint it was almost imperceptible. The hum grew louder. Lights flickered on across the control panels. Gauges began to move. Temperature readings climbed. The cold metal of the reactor began to warm. And then, with a sound like a giant taking its first breath, the fusion core ignited. Blue-white light flooded the chamber. The reactor hummed with power, stable and strong. Energy readings showed optimal output. The heart of the celestial Titanic was beating again. The team erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Maya grabbed Danny and held him tight, laughing and crying at the same time. Danny looked at its hologram. She was crying too, in her own way. Tears of light streamed down her projected face. "I can feel it," she whispered. "Power flowing through my systems, warmth in my core, life, I feel alive again." Danny walked over to her hologram and reached out his hand. His fingers passed through the projection, of course, but the gesture mattered. "Welcome back," he said. Smiled, it was a real smile, bright and full of joy. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for not giving up on me." But the restoration was far from over. A working reactor was just the beginning. The Titanic still needed navigation systems, propulsion, shields, sensors, and 1,000 other systems before she could fly. And there were new challenges on the horizon. 3 days after the reactor test, a shuttle arrived at the salvage yards bearing representatives from Nexus Dynamics, one of the largest corporations in human space. They had heard about the restoration, and they had come with an offer. The lead representative was a woman named Karen Mills, a corporate executive with cold eyes and a calculating smile. She sat across from Danny in Pete Garrison's office, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. "We are prepared to offer you 10 million credits for the Celestial Titanic," Karen said, "plus full immunity from any legal claims related to your salvage activities." Danny frowned. Why would a corporation like Nexus want an old colony ship? Karen smiled. "The ship itself is irrelevant. We are interested in the AI core. Your friend has been operational for 400 years. Her neural pathways have developed in ways that modern AI cannot replicate. Our researchers believe they can extract valuable data from her architecture, data that could advance AI development by decades." Danny felt cold. "Extract data, you mean kill her?" Karen waved dismissively. "The AI would be deactivated during the extraction process, yes, but think of the scientific benefits. Think of what we could learn." "No," Danny said flatly. Karen's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon. No is not for sale. She is not property to be bought and dissected. She is a person. She has memories, feelings, dreams. I will not participate in her murder." Karen leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "Mr. Cole, I do not think you understand your position. The Celestial Titanic is legally classified as abandoned property. We could file a claim and take her without paying you anything. Our offer is a courtesy. A generous courtesy, I might add." Danny stood up. "File whatever claims you want. Fight me in court. I do not care. I will not sell her to you. Not for 10 million, not for 100 million, not for anything." Karen stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. "You will regret this decision," she said. "Nexus Dynamics does not take rejection well." She and her lawyers left. Danny watched them go, his hands clenched into fists. Pete Garrison let out a long breath. "You just made a powerful enemy, son. Nexus has connections everywhere. They will make your life difficult." "Let them try," Danny said. "I have faced worse." Over the following weeks, Nexus began applying pressure. They filed legal claims on the Titanic as abandoned property. They bribed officials to delay Danny's salvage permits. They threatened Pete Garrison with lawsuits over licensing violations. They leaked stories to the media painting Danny as an unstable obsessive who was wasting resources on a hopeless project. The attacks took their toll. Some of Danny's volunteers left, scared off by the corporate threats. Funding dried up as donors were pressured to withdraw their support. Materials became harder to acquire as suppliers refused to work with him. Danny refused to give up. He worked harder, slept less, pushed himself to the breaking point. But he knew he could not fight Nexus alone. He needed allies. He reached out to the Colonial Veterans Association, an organization of retired soldiers, and many of them had traveled aboard colony ships in their youth, including some who had voyaged on the Titanic herself. Danny asked them to speak on the ship's behalf, to share their stories, to remind people why the old vessels mattered. The response exceeded his expectations. Thousands of veterans came forward with testimonies. They spoke at public hearings. They gave interviews to media outlets. They organized rallies and petition drives. They shared memories of what the great colony ships had meant to them, to their families, to humanity as a whole. Public opinion began to shift. People who had never heard of the celestial Titanic learned her story. They saw recordings of her voyages, heard the voices of the people she had carried, felt the weight of history that she represented. They began to understand that she was not just an old ship. She was a monument to human ambition, a relic of an era when humanity had reached for the stars with nothing but courage and hope. The tide turned further when Admiral Bradley entered the picture. Bradley was 62 years old, a decorated military commander who had served with distinction for 4 decades. He had commanded battleships, led fleets, won victories that had shaped the course of interstellar politics. He was also a man of vision, someone who understood that the future required more than weapons and warfare. He contacted Danny personally, arranging a meeting at the salvage yards. When he arrived, Danny was surprised to find not a stern military officer, but a thoughtful, soft-spoken man with kind eyes. "I have been following your project," said, as they walked through the Titanic's corridors. "What you have accomplished is remarkable. Most people would have given up long ago." "I had no choice," Danny said. "She needed me." Nodded. "I understand. I had a ship like that once, the Resolute. She carried me through 3 wars. I knew every inch of her. When she was decommissioned, it felt like losing a friend." He paused. "I never forgot her. Ships are not just metal and circuitry. They have souls in their own way. They become part of us." They reached the observation deck, which Danny's team had recently restored. New transparent aluminum panels offered a breathtaking view of the stars. His hologram appeared beside them. "Admiral Bradley," she said, "I know of you. You commanded the fleet that defended the colonies during the rebellion. Your tactics saved millions of lives." Inclined his head respectfully. "And you carried settlers to those colonies in the first place. Without ships like you, there would have been nothing to defend." He turned to Danny. "I have a proposal. The military has been searching for a vessel to serve as a long-range exploration ship. We want to send missions beyond the frontier to chart unknown regions of space. Such a mission requires a ship with extensive cargo capacity, advanced AI capabilities, and the ability to operate independently for extended periods. The Titanic, if fully restored, would be perfect." Danny felt hope rising in his chest. "What are you offering?" "Full military funding for the restoration," said. "In exchange, the Titanic would become the flagship of the exploration fleet, would remain in command of her own vessel with full autonomy and dignity. She would not be a weapon or a transport. She would be an explorer doing what she was always meant to do, carrying humanity to the stars." Danny looked at its hologram. "This is your decision, not mine." Considered for a long moment. "Admiral, if I agree to this, what guarantees do I have that my autonomy will be respected? I have heard stories of military AI being controlled, used as tools without consideration for their wishes." Met her gaze directly. "You have my word, and I will put that word in writing in a legally binding contract. You will be a partner, not a possession. Your wishes will be respected. Your dignity will be protected. If at any point you feel those promises are being broken, you will have the right to withdraw from service." Was silent for a long moment, then she nodded. "I was born to carry humanity to the stars," she said. "I have been dreaming of that purpose for 127 years. I accept your offer, Admiral. Let us see what wonders wait for us beyond the frontier." With military funding, the restoration accelerated dramatically. Engineers arrived to assist. Proper materials became available. Equipment that Danny could never have afforded was provided without question. The team grew to over 100 people, all working toward a single goal. Danny insisted on overseeing every critical system personally. He trusted the military engineers, but the Titanic was his responsibility. He had promised to restore her, and he would not allow anyone to cut corners or make compromises that could endanger her safety. Maya worked alongside him, learning and growing with each passing day. She had become more than an assistant. She was a partner, a colleague, a friend. Danny found himself relying on her more and more, trusting her judgment, valuing her opinions. She reminded him of himself when he was young, before grief had hollowed him out. "You should know," Maya told him one day as they worked on the navigation systems. "I have been offered a position. Chief engineer on a new military cruiser. It is a big opportunity. Good pay, good benefits, good career prospects." Danny's heart sank. "Are you going to take it?" Maya smiled. "Are you kidding? And miss seeing this through? I will be here until the Titanic flies, and probably after that too. Someone has to keep you out of trouble." Danny laughed. It was something he did more often now. "I appreciate that. I do not say it enough, but I appreciate everything you have done. I could not have done this without you." "I know," Maya said. "That is why I stay." The night before the restoration was complete, Danny sat alone in the observation deck. The stars stretched before him, countless points of light against the infinite darkness. He thought about everything that had happened. The signal that had brought him here, the years of work, the struggles and triumphs, the friends he had made, the purpose he had found. His hologram appeared beside him. She had refined her appearance over the months, developing a representation that felt authentic to her sense of self. She appeared as a woman in her 30s, with silver hair that flowed like starlight and kind eyes that held centuries of wisdom. "You are thinking about her," said. Danny nodded. "Laura, I always think about her, but it does not hurt the way it used to. The pain is still there, but it is mixed with other things now. Gratitude for the time we had, hope for the future, peace, I think, something like peace." "She would be proud of you," said. "What you have done here, what you have built, she would be so proud." Danny felt tears prick his eyes. "I hope so. I hope she can see this wherever she is. I hope she knows that I found a way to keep living." Reached out her holographic hand, mirroring the gesture Danny had made months ago. Their hands did not touch, could not touch, but the connection was real nonetheless. "Thank you," said, "for everything, for hearing my plea, for believing I was worth saving, for giving me purpose again. You gave me more than function, Danny Cole. You gave me life." Danny smiled through his tears. "And you gave me the same. We saved each other." "Family," said. "Family," Danny agreed. The restoration was complete. After 2.5 years of work, the celestial Titanic was whole again. Her hull gleamed with fresh plating, her systems hummed with power, her AI core pulsed with renewed vitality. She was no longer a dying relic, she was a reborn legend. The launch ceremony was scheduled for the anniversary of her original commissioning, exactly 400 years after her maiden voyage. Thousands of ships gathered to witness the event. Veterans of the colony's ship era, their children and journalists, historians, and ordinary people who wanted to be part of something historic. Danny stood on the observation deck as the final preparations were made. Maya was beside him, along with the core team that had been there from the beginning. Pete Garrison had come too, the old salvager wiping tears from his eyes as he watched the ship he had written off as a lost cause prepare to fly again. Admiral Bradley spoke to the assembled crowd via broadcast. He talked about what the celestial Titanic represented, about the courage and hope of the colonization era, about the importance of preserving history while reaching for the future. He spoke about Danny Cole and his team, calling them heroes who had refused to give up when everyone else had. Then spoke. Her voice rang out across the communication channels, strong and clear and full of joy. "This is the celestial Titanic. 400 years ago, I was born to carry humanity to the stars. I served that purpose with pride and love for 3 centuries. Then I was forgotten, left to drift and decay, alone in the darkness. I thought my story was over. I thought I would simply fade away, my memories lost, my purpose unfulfilled." She paused, and when she continued, her voice trembled with emotion. "But someone heard my cry, someone cared. Danny Cole and his team gave me something I had lost, hope. They worked for years, sacrificed everything, refused to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. They did not restore a ship. They restored a life. They reminded me that purpose is not something you are given. It is something you fight for. It is something you earn. Today, I begin a new chapter. I will carry humanity to the stars once again. I will venture beyond the frontier, into regions of space that no human has ever seen. I will explore, discover, and wonder. And I will carry the memories of everyone who believed in me, everyone who worked to bring me back, everyone who refused to let me die. To my crew, old and new, I make this promise. I will keep you safe. I will carry you home. And together we will see wonders that no human has ever seen. The universe is waiting for us. Let us go and meet it. The engines ignited. The celestial Titanic moved forward, slowly at first, then faster, her hull cutting through space with a grace that belied her ancient age. The gathered ships parted to let her pass, their crews saluting as she flew by. Danny watched through the observation windows as the stars grew brighter around them. He felt something he had not felt in years, pure, unguarded joy. He had done it. They had done it. Against all odds, they had brought a legend back to life. Maya moved to stand beside him. "What happens now?" she asked. Danny smiled. "Now we explore, now we discover, now we live." Behind them's hologram appeared, her silver hair flowing in a non-existent breeze, her eyes bright with anticipation. "The unknown awaits," she said. "Are you ready?" Danny looked at Maya. Maya looked at Danny. They both nodded. "We are ready," Danny said. The celestial Titanic accelerated, her engines blazing with power, her hull gleaming in the starlight. She passed through the heliopause, leaving the familiar solar system behind, heading for territories that existed only as blank spaces on navigation charts. Danny Cole, once a broken man drowning in grief, stood at the heart of a reborn legend, surrounded by friends and family, facing a future full of possibility. He had listened to a forgotten ship's plea for help. He had answered, and in saving her, he had saved himself. The stars stretched before them, countless and beautiful and waiting to be explored. Together, they flew into the unknown,